Our planet is just buzzing with life. We're talking an estimated 8.7 million species. And honestly, that's just a guess. We've barely scratched the surface in terms of what we've actually discovered. It's just this incredible, almost overwhelming variety. So when you're faced with numbers like that, where do you even begin to make sense of it all?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? It's something scientists have been wrestling with for centuries. When you're dealing with that kind of staggering biodiversity, you need a system. And the best way to think about it is to imagine that we're not just scientists, we're librarians.
Just picture walking into the biggest library imaginable. Only it's a total mess. Every living thing is like its own unique book, but they're all just piled up with no rhyme or reason. The ultimate challenge, then, is for us to become the librarians who bring order to this massive, amazing library of life.
And what's the very first rule of organizing any library? Well, you have to know what's a book and what's, say, just a rock or a piece of paper. So for us, before we can classify anything, we have to nail down the most fundamental question of all. What does it actually mean to be alive?
So biologists have this kind of mental checklist they run through. Does it grow? Can it reproduce? Does it have a metabolism? All those chemical reactions going on inside to keep it running. Can it sense what's going on around it and organize itself? These are the classic signs of life. But as you'll see, it's not always quite that simple.
And this is such a great way to think about it. Take growth, for instance. A snowball gets bigger when you roll it in the snow, right? But that's just adding layers on the outside. True biological growth, the kind we're talking about, it's an inside job. It happens from within, through things like cell division.
See, the real trick is to find a characteristic that applies every single time with zero exceptions. For instance, not every living thing can reproduce. A mule is a perfect example. It's alive, but it can't have offspring. But every single living thing, from the tiniest bacterium to a giant blue whale, can sense and respond to its environment. That's a true defining property of life.
Okay, so now we can confidently tell our books apart from the non-books. It's time to start organizing this chaotic library. And this is where a really fascinating field of science gets to shine.
And that science is called taxonomy. It's the whole process of identifying organisms, giving them official names, and then, this is the important part, arranging them into a logical system. It is literally the science of being a librarian for the entire living world. And it's kind of cool because at the very heart of all this classification is the actual stuff of life. As the famous biologist T.H. Huxley put it, protoplasm, that living gunk inside a cell, is the physical basis of life. It's a great reminder that all the different books in our library are deep down written with the same basic ink.
Now, the first huge problem these librarians of life had to solve was a communication nightmare. Think about it. The animal we call a mountain lion here in North America, in other places it's a cougar or a puma. We needed one single universal title for every book, so a scientist in Brazil and a scientist in Japan would know they were talking about the exact same thing.
And the solution they came up with was so simple and so elegant. It's called binomial nomenclature, which literally just means two-name naming system. It was championed by this absolute legend, a Swedish botanist named Carolus Linnaeus, who we now call the father of taxonomy because of this incredible contribution. And to make sure everybody, everywhere, does it the same way, there are just a few simple rules. The names are based in Latin, so they're universal. They always have two parts. They're written in italics, so they stand out. And the first name, the genus, is always capitalized, while the second name, the species, is always lowercase. Simple!
Let's look at a real one. The scientific name for a mango. Mangifera is the genus, which is a group of closely related plants. Indica is the specific species. And what about that Lin you see at the end? That's an abbreviation for Linnaeus himself. It tells you he was the first person to formally describe and name this plant. It's like citing the original author of the book. Pretty cool, huh?
Okay, so every book has a unique title. Awesome. Now, where on the shelf does it go? For that, we need a filing system. You can think of it as the Dewey Decimal System, but for every living thing on the planet. This system is a hierarchy, basically a set of nested folders, one inside the other. They're called taxa. You start with the broadest category, the kingdom, and get more and more specific all the way down to species. And you might notice that little quirk for the second level. Biologists use phylum for animals and division for plants. That's just a little historical holdover from when zoology and botany were developing separately.
So, quick question for you to think about.
As you move up that ladder, from the super specific level of species toward the really broad level of kingdom, what do you think happens to the number of features that all the members share? Do they get more similar or less?
The answer is they decrease. It's a little counterintuitive at first, but it makes perfect sense. The group gets way bigger, but its members become much less similar. Think about it. All the organisms in the species Canis lupus, gray wolves, are really similar. But the members of the entire animal kingdom, well, that includes everything from a wolf to a jellyfish. The higher you go, the broader you get.
So what does the toolkit for one of these librarians of life actually look like? Well, to do all this work, they rely on a whole set of specialized resources and tools that we call taxonomic aids.
First up, you've got the herbarium. Think of it as a reference library of pressed plants. Scientists collect specimens, dry them out, press them flat, and mount them on these sheets with all the info about where and when they were found. It's a priceless physical record for botanists. And in a very similar way, museums are repositories for both plant and animal specimens. This is where you find the collections of insects pinned in boxes, the skeletons of long-extinct animals, all of it carefully preserved for scientists to study for years to come.
And don't forget zoos. They're not just for us to go look at cool animals. Zoological parks are crucial taxonomic aids because they're living libraries. They let scientists study the behavior, the diet, and the entire life cycle of animals up close, all in a protected environment.
And this last one is maybe the cleverest of them all, the taxonomic key. It's basically a choose-your-own-adventure for identifying an organism. It gives you a series of 2 choices at a time, like, does the flower have 5 petals or 6? And by making a series of these choices, you follow a path that eventually leads you to the exact identification.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a really neat system, but why does all of this matter so much? Well, this whole project of organizing the Library of Life isn't just some academic exercise. It's the fundamental language biologists use to talk about evolution, to track the health of our ecosystems, and to make life or death decisions about conservation. It allows us to read the incredible, interconnected story of all life on this planet.
And that really brings us full circle to this one last big idea. By creating a system that shows us how every other living thing is related, we also get a much clearer picture of our own place in this huge, complicated web of life. It makes us ask, what's our role and what's our responsibility as just one book among millions in this incredible shared library?